Chapter 29. Moreover, Job continued his parable and said, "Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God preserved me, when his candle shined upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. As I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God was upon my tabernacle, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were about me, when I washed my steps with butter, and the rock poured me out rivers of oil. When I went out to the gate through the city, when I prepared my seat in the street, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the aged arose and stood up. The princes refrained talking, and laid their hand on their mouths. The nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard me, then it blessed me. When the eye saw me, it gave witness to me, because I delivered the poor that cried, and the fatherless, and him that had none to help him. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My judgment was as a robe and a diadem. I was eyes to the blind, and feet was I to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not I searched out. And I brake the jaws of the wicked, and plucked the spoil out of his teeth. Then I said, I shall die in my nest, I shall multiply my days as the sand. My root was spread out by the waters, and the dew lay all night upon my branch. My glory was fresh in me, and my bow was renewed in my hand. Unto me men gave ear, and waited, and kept silence at my counsel. After my words they spake not again, and my speech dropped upon them. And they waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain. If I laughed on them, they believed it not, and the light of my countenance they cast not down. I chose out their way, and sat chief, and dwelt as a king in the army, as one that comforteth the mourners." In chapter 29 here, we have Job remembering how he lived and how things were before all of these troubles came upon him. And he is recounting, partly I suspect for himself, but not just that, for these people who are supposed to know him, who have come to counsel and comfort him, how he lived. And this is a recitation of righteousness and purity and honor such as very few people in his time would have lived. Now, I'm just going to go through the previous chapter and this chapter so you understand just all the area he's covering in some of what he says here. "Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God preserved me," before all of this happened. "When his candle shined upon my head, when I had the light of God to light my way, and when by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the days of my youth, when the secret of God, the honor, the respect, the understanding of God was upon my tabernacle, when it was in my life, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were about me, when I washed my steps with butter." Now, what that meant basically was, obviously don't wash your steps with butter, but when it was smooth walking is what that means. "And the rock poured me out rivers of oil." In other words, it seemed as though he had untold wealth. Rock doesn't pour out anything. And if you can get oil out of a rock, usually olive oil out of a rock, it means you're very prosperous. Obviously, you don't get it out of a rock, but what it means is that the land that you have, however it is yielding its strength and its riches to you. "When I went out to the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the street." When you went out to the gate of the city, you were considered one of the elders of the town, one of the righteous leaders of the town. "The young men saw me and hid themselves." And the young men knew in their folly and their stupidity that they didn't want to be around Job, because they didn't want to have him tell them how they needed to shape up, perhaps. "And the aged arose," all those guys who were like his friends, thought they were wiser than they were. They knew that Job was a man of integrity. "The princes," these are the established men of the community, not necessarily princes in the sense of children of the king, but the so-called wise men of the town refrained from talking, laid their hand on their mouth. In other words, they deliberately shut up because they knew that if they were talking and Job was going to talk, they would look silly. The nobles held their peace, and their tongue cleaved to the roof of their mouth. In other words, if the tongue cleaved to the roof of the mouth, they couldn't utter anything. If you stuck your tongue to the roof of your mouth, you cannot talk. When the ear heard me, then it blessed me. In other words, when people heard what he said, they blessed him for his wisdom. When the eye saw me, it gave witness to me that he was righteous, because I delivered the poor that cried. He gave to the poor that he could see, and to the fatherless, and him that had none to help him. He was a generous man. All the things that God gave him, he was a steward to all those people who had nothing. The blessing of him that was ready to perish came upon me. In other words, he was the one who was there for those who had nobody to help them. He caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. Widows in Israel had nobody to care for them. Oftentimes they had no land, they had no farm, they had no wealth, they had no way of getting food, and he would have given them what they needed to live on. I put on righteousness. In other words, he wore righteousness as though it was a part of his clothing, as a part of himself. My judgment was as a robe and diadem. People could see him and know that he was a righteous. Now, diadem was like a sort of a crown that had a diamond or something on it. And it was something that people would see him and they would know the kind of person he was. I was eyes to the blind, and a feet was I to the lame. I helped those people who were disabled. I was a father to the poor, and the cause which I knew not I searched out. Whatever happened, he was always on the lookout for those things that he might not know, where he might help people. I break the jaws of the wicked. In other words, those who were wicked and who were willing to take advantage of other people. He stopped their talking. It doesn't mean he actually punched them and broke their jaws. He just stopped their talking about how stupid this other person was and how they deserved whatever happened to them. I plucked the spoil out of his teeth. In other words, he took away his right to talk, his ability to talk, and accuse people of being unrighteous and deserving what had happened to them. He said, I shall die in my nest, I shall multiply my days as the sand. In other words, he was thinking that this was going to go on forever. He would have no end of this time. My root was spread out by the waters. They knew that the water that was on the ground, the more water there was on the ground, the more the roots would spread out to where the water was. And the dew lay all night upon my branch. He was well watered. He would continue to grow. There would be no shortage of the things he would need. My glory was fresh in me, and my bow was renewed in my hand. In other words, he had everything he needed to continue. He saw no end to his being able to live like that. Unto me men gave ear. They listened, and they waited, and they kept silence at my counsel. They didn't argue with me. After my words they spake not again, and my speech dropped upon them. And they waited for me as for the rain. They looked forward to hearing from Job. And they opened their mouth wide as for the latter rain. The area of Israel where they were needed the latter rain in order for there to be a harvest. They waited for Job's words so they would know what to do and how to live. If I laughed on them, they believed it not. And the light of my countenance they cast not down. In other words, they didn't try to put him down for anything. I chose out their way and set chief, and dwelt as a king in the army, and one that comforted the mourners. He was the one that they all relied on. That was Job. That's how he lived.